Hey guys, Stefan and Andreas here again. In this video we want to talk about a subject that a lot of people have been asking about, and that is setting up a corporation, a company for your Kindle publishing business. A lot of you guys that are just brand new starting out, this might not be relevant for you, but for the guys that have been doing this for a while, they're making a couple $1,000s a month, and this is definitely the next step of what you want to learn about and get into. And we're going to cover a bit of that. So do you want to start it off just by telling people about the advantages and why you'd want to set up a corporation? Or
yeah, I mean, this is right up my alley because I own my own companies aside from Kindle, and so and we grew up with our dad, who was great at throwing us in the fire and starting companies. I mean, I think I was 18, 19 years old when I learned how to incorporate a company. Where we are here in Canada is quite easy. You could do it online at a nominal cost. But the theory is the same across all countries, okay? What benefits you, what style of corporation you're going to make is just, you talk to your accountant, do some research based on the kind of income that you're going to generate. But incorporating from being a proprietor, and a proprietor is basically where all the liability is on you, because you're selling a product and somebody can come right back to you and tie it to you, whether it's faulty or whatever repercussions it has. Incorporating is basically you're making it its own entity. So it has its own name, its own image, its own brand, and it protects. It becomes a barrier where there's no liability. You eliminate that liability directly to the public that you're selling that product. So that's the biggest advantage to incorporating or making a corporation, is that you eliminate that liability. And of course, there is some liability because, as publishers, we're outsourcing a lot of our writing, and we do put it through a copyscape and programs to make sure that there's nothing copyrighted, and that the material is its own material and not taken from somewhere. But it's not. It's the online world is still not flawless, right? I mean, still things squeak through the cracks, and the last thing you're going to want is to generate this big company or big publishing establishment where you've got 100, 200 books, and then all of a sudden you got someone knocking on your door to unpublish all your books because or suing you, or who knows. I mean, I haven't heard of anything. I've heard of a few scares of people, but nothing big. But it only takes one, and you don't want to be that one, right? So, but there are other advantages too, right? I mean, there's tax advantages because how many of you, I'd be curious to know, are writing off your expenses? That the expenses that you can do it as a proprietor, but there's sometimes more advantages as a corporation in regards to that. Also you're creating an image, right? With the corporation, you're creating structure, you're creating branding, which is a little bit more difficult to do with yourself. Public can relate to a corporation a little bit better when you're selling a product than they can to an individual, unless you're a figurehead like Stefan, maybe with KMM and Michael Jordan in the background, who could probably have success selling a product. But as a publisher yourself, I honestly believe that if a consumer goes on Amazon and looking for a book, and they see a publishing firm behind the book, depending on the niche, because some niches, you'll probably have some better success selling your books, because that might be something that reinforces the book, the legitimacy behind the book. And so those are kind of the marketing and kind of the liability, the advantages. I mean, there are a lot of pros and there are a lot of negatives. Of course, the negatives are that you're taxing. You're taxing at the corporate level, and then you're taxing when you pull money out of the company. But you also can write off more as a corporation. You can write off partial of your rent if you're renting, because you could have an office. You could write off part of your living expenses like utility bills and things like that. And of course, it's different across every country, the percentages, the ratios, and all those types of things. So you'd have to check your company, your country to confirm that. Yeah. But for myself, I've established a corporation, a number of them, basically each KDP, once I've reached a certain amount, about 30 books, I think, is a good starting point. to start thinking about a corporation.
If you're making money.
If you're making money. Yeah, if
you have 30 bucks and making no money.
Yeah, well, that's the key, right? Exactly. There's no point going any further. If you're not making any money at 30 bucks, you might want to hire a coach, or you might want to go back and look at all the material again to see what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Because at 30 bucks, you've gone through the learning curve. You should be making money at some point. So you should stop. I mean, that's the first thing I say when a student comes to me and he's got 30 books and he's been doing it for 4 or 5 months and he isn't making any money. The first thing I say is, do not publish any more books. Let's look at your books, and then let's before we publish any more, let's clean up your system. So not to get sidetracked with the corporation, there's a number of ways that you could take advantage of it. The biggest reason why I incorporated it is because I have assets. I own a construction company. I own real estate. I own a number of other assets that I've made a lot of money on. And the last thing I want to do is publish 100 books that generate me, at the time, $6,500, now well over 10 grand. The last thing I want to do is have somebody knock on my door and forget about my 10 grand a month and taking after my royalties. The last thing I want to do is take my house or take anything. I have a lot to lose. Now, a lot of you might not. You might. It just depends. I mean, I have a lot of people that are doing really well and have a lot. They have businesses. So that even is more important, that you want to protect the welfare of your life aside from Kindle.
Yeah.
And so you want to incorporate to do that. Now, when you start to incorporate, there's ways that you can incorporate to reduce even the further liability. Now, I've created a corporation for every KDP account because, of course, we've encouraged Stefan in his previous programs and videos and stuff, and myself, that you want to have all your eggs in one basket, right? You don't want to have Amazon owning all your royalties.
In order to have more KDP accounts, you need different entities. You can't have 5 KDP accounts under the one corporation. You have to have 5 different corporations.
Exactly, right? So I've gone ahead and I've incorporated, when I reach a certain point, each entity. And what I've done is I've created a parent company that basically I put all my resources together, all my VA support, all my freelance services, all my accounting, all my services that are provided for my corporations at each KDP account. And so I put them all together and I reduce my costs. And then I'm calling that a management or consulting firm that charges a monthly expense to my accounts so that I siphon the money out. So that you don't have all this money accumulating in your corporation, so that if you have a problem down the road, great, you've eliminated the liability personally, but you still could lose your assets that is accumulated in your corporation. So there's ways that you could structure yourself that you can eliminate the liability completely and at the same time get your money out of those companies. And so, I go through this in my program because I'm coaching to upscale and to automate, and part of that is getting to a point where you're going to have 30 books and more, and finding ways to reduce that cost and getting your money out, and all those strategies that come into play. A lot of you might just hire accountants to do that, and that's fine. You can. I have accountants that do a lot of my work, but in regards to corporate structure, I do that all myself because I have a lot of experience in it with my other companies. So this is something that you should be serious about. I mean, at some point, if you're going to be a big publisher, you want to get to that, right?
Yeah. So just to kind of go back and simplify it, so there's sole proprietor, right? And then the sole proprietor is basically you're just doing it yourself.
That's how probably 80% of you guys are probably
more. 90%.
90% are probably just your KDP account is your own name. They're sending the royalties to your personal bank account, and as a result of that, you're gonna as Andreas mentioned, you're not protected by that. So if somebody sues you or whatever challenge comes up, they can go after you directly, which is a risk. And then also you're going to be, depending on your country, at a higher tax bracket as well. So for example, here in Canada, it depends on how much money you're making, but if you're making like $100,000, you're taxed like 40-something percent, right?
And that's a big thing. Yeah, exactly. That's another.
Here in Vancouver, at least, I know Alberta's cheaper, Ontario's more.
That's a big thing right there. That's another advantage. That by incorporating or making a corporation, you go into lower tax brackets. Here we have a small business tax where basically if you make a 15% or something like that, under $450,000 in profit. So I mean, that's a huge advantage, because if I didn't incorporate and I put that towards my salary, half of my Kindle money would go to the government.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly, yeah.
So whereas now I can put it as a corporation, and I have strategy after strategy of how I can use corporate money to make more money. And I mean, that's something that I constantly talk to Stefan about for his accumulation of wealth, and how I've had successful is I've taken corporate money and I've invested it and created more passive income. And so we'll do a video on that as well.
Yeah.
But that's another good point that you brought up, definitely.
So you can incorporate, and depending on where you live, like in the U.S., there's corporation, there's also an LLC.
Yeah.
And I've heard there's benefits of that too. So
There
you're
is.
going to want to be aware. We're just kind of referencing Canada and a bit of the U.S. is pretty much the same as Canada, but of course it's different for your country. I know some countries there's no tax.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that. So
Just liability.
Yeah, it depends on where you live.
Yeah.
At what point, because I know you started off as sole proprietor, I did as well, at what point would you recommend for people, like maybe they reach a certain amount of money that they're making, because there are some expenses to it and it's a little bit more paperwork involved too.
Yeah, well, and then you got to set up your bank account with its own entity. You're going to have to
Yeah.
do corporate taxes, which are a little bit more complicated than doing Canadian taxes. You're going to have to amortize your assets, which are the books, because those are considered amortized. You know, basically you can't write off all their expenses. You're supposed to amortize them. So it gets a little bit more technical. But the reality is, I mean, the more books you publish, the more you're exposed to the world. And it's reaching all ends of the world. Now, don't stress about it. I mean, it's very unlikely that you're going to get sued. But one thing that could happen is, even if it's a minor lawsuit, so let's say you're a publisher in Canada, okay, or you're a publisher in Europe or in India or wherever, and you get somebody out of the US, and unfortunately that's where most of the cases come out of, is that you get someone in the US and they sue. Okay, there's not much they can really do to you, but they can restrict you from coming into the US. And it happens every day. Watch some shows about governments not letting you into their country because of a minor offense or minor case against you. And that's the last thing you want over a 99-cent book or a $2.99 book. So I kind of look at it as, when I realized that I got so many books and I was spreading out, because just imagine all the free downloads. You know, now you got 30 books and you're putting through promo and they're getting 5,000 downloads. I mean, it's exponential, right? It just keeps compounding. So I kind of looked at it at a certain point that, you know, I had to, if I was going to continue publishing and I was going to continue upscaling, I had to eventually I didn't even look at the money myself. I just looked at it as the liability was too high, and I incorporated.
And the other options too, I mean, you can put disclaimers in your books. So if you have a book on dieting or recipes or whatever, put disclaimers in them. I mean, you can get business insurance, but that can be a hassle.
Yeah, difficult
depending
too.
on what kind of business that you're in.
You know, most of the time, even when somebody sues you, you know, they don't really have a case. They're not going to win. But it's the whole headache of it all and the whole process of it all. And, you know, you may just decide, if it's incorporated and it's going that way, that, you know what, you just walk away from the company. And you may be able to find a maneuver to take your assets with you and move it to another company. But at least it takes your name out of it. Because, you know, my experience is, from what I've heard, I haven't gone through any major lawsuit, because I've always taken the precautionary steps to separate myself from all of that. That it's more of a headache or anything, and you just don't want to deal with it, and you don't want to be discouraged either, because you may be a successful publisher and you may make a good living from it, and so you don't want it to ruin your career and get you out of publishing because you had one bad apple.
And it doesn't matter. I mean, you could be doing everything right. You could be helping people. 1,000 people can love your stuff, but there's always going to be that one person, for whatever reason, and that goes for any business out there, right? Any business is always at risk. Anytime you're dealing with people, then you're at risk.
Now, just having said that, we can take this at a small scale as a Kindle publisher, but what's our end goal? I mean, it's a platform, right? We're trying to get into paperback, Audible, products, physical product. Now you're getting into a whole different world, and there's higher risks in even those. So you know, especially with blogging, because you're giving advice, you're spreading out information, and people interpret that information the way they want, and it could change their life the way that they want to, and what it wasn't intended to be when we tell you. That's why we always try to encourage you to consult with an accountant and get legal advice, and we can only give you our opinions based on our experiences. So as we encourage you to upscale and to grow your business, you're going to get into other online activities, which are going to have their own risks and liabilities. And so blanketing that across with a corporation, you kind of kill all those birds and stones, those stones uncovered by having that. And so, and having multiple companies like I've done with my KDP, I can separate my different ventures. I can have my coaching in one KDP corporation, and I can have my wife who blogs now in her corporation in KDP. So you can split up your assets. So now you're diversifying even better because now it's not under one roof.
Well, a lot of people too, they might have a corporation and then establish all these assets in that corporation more than in their personal.
Yeah.
Right? They could buy real estate, you could buy stocks.
Yeah.
And then if somebody goes after that, well, then you've got a lot of assets at risk too. So that's why setting up, this is more advanced of course, but setting up multiple corporations, taking out the money that's in that corporation and transferring it to something else or to yourself personally. The corporation there, just to protect yourself, is just kind of like a smoke screen, right?
Yeah.
It's just like a blanket that...
And it's buying you time to take it, to find the loopholes, I call them loopholes in their governments, in the way that they're trying to always take as much money they can from you. It buys you time to find ways to get that money out, whether it's expensing, doing all your research and expensing as much as you can, or finding ways to be diverse to reinvest in other ways, and like that. Like I said, we're going to do a video on investing, taking your Kindle money and putting it into other ideas, right?
Okay, how about paying yourself? So the company, for example, let's say the person sets up a corporation, they set up a bank account, and all the paperwork and everything. The money from their books are going into that corporation. That money, how do they pay themselves with that?
Well, a great thing about the passive income or the type of work in the Kindle business is you can pay yourself in the dividends, because you could say that you could argue that there's no real management, especially when you get to automation. Argument might be a little bit less because you are heavily involved in the system at the beginning. But eventually, if you're into automation where your system is completely, your whole publishing is outsourced, basically you're just collecting royalties. And at that point, you could basically collect dividends. And dividends is typically taxed at a lower rate than anything else. And so you could pay yourself in a dividend form. Now, how much to pay yourself? It really depends on how much you're making, right? At some point in your Kindle business, you should be making money. And I mean, I was fortunate enough after my first month, I started to make money. But that's not everybody's going to do. But I think that after a few months, you should be having some success, publishing books. It doesn't take very long to figure out how to do it. The market's massive. So, I mean, there's so many categories that are untouched that you could be doing it. So, are you asking how much to pay yourself, or are you just
what are the options? There's a dividend and there's salary.
There's a salary. You could just take a monthly salary. You could take a royalty yourself. That you're a royalty off the books. For every book you take a percentage as a royalty earner because you're a publisher of that book, right? Because you could be the publisher or the writer. You could argue that you're the writer of that book, and you could just take a royalty quietly, or you could just do a dividend, or you could do a salary. I mean, there's a number of different structures that you could take. You could just take a 1 month payment every 2 months. It just depends, right? Yeah. I don't even take a salary from my lower companies. I just take a dividend from my top company. Yeah. Right.
And we recommend again to talk to an accountant because it's going to be different. Every situation is going to be different as well, because how much you pay yourself is going to be depending on the tax bracket you're in and how much
in your other income,
from your career and everything. So if you're already in a high tax bracket, you might not want to pay yourself too much because then you're going to get taxed a lot more too, right?
Exactly, right? So there's a lot of strategies, but I mean, there's ways that you can maybe take some of your personal expenses and tax them through your corporation, so that you're saving more of your real income, your realized income in your other career, and then taxing heavily the profits that you're making in your Kindle business, for instance. So there's ways to take advantage of that. I use that strategy many times in my businesses, where I was getting good income from real estate, for instance, and I moved over the expenses on that income-generating property because I wanted to bring down the expenses somewhere else, or the profit somewhere else, or make more profit somewhere else. So these are the strategies of being diversified, right? These are the strategies. This is the power of Kindle, is that it's creating these opportunities. We didn't talk about this before you signed up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is where it's come to now, right? So,
Yeah.
so I mean, you can consult a lawyer with this. You can consult a notary. You can consult an accountant in regards to establishing this, or you can get some coaching. Stefan has experience. I have experience.
And this is all stuff, I mean, I didn't know when I started a business, and I think most people don't, unless you go to university or school.
Yeah.
You kind of have to figure this out on your own. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of benefit. You know, I've been running a business since I was 21, you for years as well, and to learn this as a part of a Kindle publishing course is pretty cool. So
yeah, and I mean,
that's what we want to help, is you guys be entrepreneurs, business owners, and understand this stuff because it's really important.
exactly, perfect.
Yeah. And one more thing I want to talk about is just the writing off. You know, we mentioned a bit about that. Any of the expenses you guys are incurring for your Kindle business can be write off as expenses. Even coaching, for example, or the Kindle publishing course, you know, the money that you paid for that or full disclosure can be written off as an expense. Outsourcing your books or covers, virtual assistants.
These are all expenses, and you know, if you buy a new phone, for instance, and you need to use that phone for correspondence between you and your VAs, and to just upload books, or you have books that are going into Create Space and going to upload, you can write off your phone bill. You can write off the internet expense. You can write off the internet expense at home. Because now you got a Kindle business. You can write it all off if you want. You could say that that's your bread and butter. That's the only reason you're online, right? So, I mean, those are just small things. Your hydro or your utilities bill, you know, your rent. There's ways that you can write off all of that. If you're using your room to market your product and to spend time doing all your marketing and your research, you can write all that off. If you have to go buy supplies for your printer because you're printing stuff off, you can write. I mean, there's so many things, and so I mean, really, that's kind of a lesson on its own of all the advantages that you can. Because that's years of experience myself going through trial and error and talking to my accountant year after year and after year, knowing exactly what is write-off material and not. And I'm always pushing the limit, of course, because I think the government makes enough off me. But you know, for you learning off right at the beginning, I mean, some of these tips could save you some huge amount of money. Right?
Yeah, because a lot of your personal expenses can be written off.
Yeah.
You know, in your corporation, all that, as you mentioned, like your cell phone and things of that nature as well. So it's really important to learn that. But I think we've covered a lot in this. If you guys want to know more, you can send Andreas a message and talk to him. Directing everyone to talk to him, because I get a lot of messages these days. And
mine's starting to build too now,
kind of balance it out. But of course, talk to an accountant as well. I mean, those are the true experts. We can share based on our experience and knowledge.
We can set you in the right direction.
And we're always learning from accountants, and it's going to be different, of course, based on your location. But we're just going to cover the basics of it. To help you guys get started, and hopefully this has been helpful. And we've got some more videos coming, so thanks for watching.